fire shelters are worn by all personnel on the fire line. They are a required piece of PPE, personal protective equipment, and they are very much viewed as a last resort for survival. The shelter is designed for a firefighter to get inside if overcome by the advancing fire. It provides some protection from radiant heat, and it also provides a limited amount of breathable air within the shelter for a certain period of time. But to be very clear, this is very much a last resort. The 10 firefighting orders, LCES, it's all designed so that a firefighter is never put in a position to use this piece of equipment. It is only deployed when a firefighter cannot get to a safety zone in time. And typically, if this is the case, then something has gone wrong. Again, a last resort. Nobody wants to be put in a situation where they their last line of defense is crawling inside that thing. What we're going to do now is just look at the parts of a wildfire and discuss some suppression tactics. The origin of the fire is where the fire was initiated. It's, you could consider it the red dot on the slide. As the fire spreads, whether it's pushed by wind or topography, the advancing front is referred to as the head. The head of the fire is the most intense portion of the fire. It's the most rapidly spreading portion of the fire. As the fire progresses, it spreads laterally as well to both the right and left flanks. It also backs away from the origin, forming the rear of the fire. The backing portion of the fire is often the least intense and slowest moving part of it. This is an illustration of an advancing head fire. This is the hottest portion of the fire. And again, it spreads upslope or it spreads with the prevailing wind. This is an illustration of backing fire. The fire spreads because there's fuel available to burn, but it moves slower and less intense because it's either backing down slope or backing against the prevailing wind. Suppression tactics are based primarily on current and expected fire behavior. This chart provides some general guidelines on what tactics could be effectively employed based on flame length at the head of the fire. Flames shorter than 4 feet often can be safely suppressed at the head or flanks of the fire by crews with hand tools, and generally hand line will be effective enough at halting the spread. That's referred to as direct attack. Building fire line right next to the advancing fire. Beyond that flame length, beyond that 4-foot flame length, direct attack is typically no longer much of an option. When flame lengths are above 11 feet, there are really no effective suppression tactics that can be applied to the head of the fire, and you better just get everybody out in front of the thing, out of the way. Here we're just going to contrast two different approaches to suppressing fire driven by topography. This first approach is typically how the U.S. Forest Service approaches fire, especially on sustained steep terrain, common in the western part of the country. Crews anchor into a safety zone at the rear of the fire. It could be a road or some other landscape feature that's not going to burn. That will serve as a suitable anchor point, and they progress up the flanks, establishing line, progressing towards the head to eventually pinch it off at the top. By establishing line this way, the fire is never below the crew, and there's less likelihood of the fire hooking the crew with the crew ending up between two portions of active fire. This slide illustrates how fire is typically suppressed in the mountains of western North Carolina by the North Carolina Forest Service. Here, where direct attack can be performed and a suitable anchor point is available above the fire, typically the head is attacked directly and fire line is constructed downhill along the flanks. it should be recognized that the North Carolina Forest Service follow what is referred to as a black line policy to mitigate the dangers of constructing fire line with fire below the crews. So as line is constructed, all the unburned fuel between the crew and the fire is burned out progressively. So assuming the crew started from a suitable anchor point, and assuming they're carrying the black with them, they're burning out unburned fuel with them as they're progressing down slope. The crew can always get back into the black of an already burned area if the fire endangers them from below. Essentially, the burned area, is utilized as a potential safety zone. And just to reiterate, direct attack refers to the construction of fire line directly adjacent to the advancing fire. And this can only occur when the fire behavior allows it. Parallel attack is really common, and it's utilized when the edge of the fire is irregular. To maximize effectiveness and to minimize effort, fire line should always be constructed in as straight a line as possible. With parallel attack, line is constructed parallel to the approaching fire, and any pockets of unburned fuel are burned out by the crew. Any fingers that have not burned yet between the line and the approaching fire is burned out. Indirect attack is utilized when fire behavior is such that direct attack is not possible. In this case, crews back off. Line is constructed in a strategic position, often just off the ridge the head fire is approaching, and crews will set a backfire designed to back off the line just created and consume the available fuel between the fire line and the approaching head. This slide provides an illustration of what this may look like in a really general sense. The image here shows a wind-driven fire, but you could replace the word wind with slope as well. But you guys get the idea. The backing fire moves slowly off the established line, either against the wind or down slope, consuming the fuel ahead of the advancing head fire. Fire line, whether constructed by hand or machine, should be established down to mineral soil. Logs, tree roots, and anything else that may spread fire across the line is to be removed. Standing dead trees or snags are also removed along the line. They pose a couple of threats. They may throw embers across the line if they ignite. They may also catch fire, fall down across the line, and spread fire that way as well. Line at a minimum should be 1.5 times the flame length, but again, that is just a minimum. Here is a slide showing the two most common methods of line construction, with a bladed fire line above, utilizing a bulldozer, and a hand line being constructed by a crew below it. These are examples of firing tools utilized for both suppression tactics and prescribed fire. Drip torches, the guy in the kind of the top left there, is carrying a drip torch. Typically, a drip torch has a mixture of diesel and regular gasoline. So drip torches, fusees, which you see on the bottom left-hand corner, these are carried by hand crews to conduct burnout and backfire operations. There are several aerial ignition methods that could be employed utilizing a helicopter. Generally, these are used to burn larger areas at once. And just to wrap this section up, there is a difference between a contained fire and one that is out. Once a fire is contained, most often there's still active fire or smoldering fuel within the fire line. To limit the chance of reburn and to reduce the likelihood of that fire escaping outside of the line, those internal hotspots are put out during the process of mop-up. Often mop-up is just limited to a certain distance with, inside the line, whether that be 50 feet inside the line or 100 feet inside the line. Occasionally complete mop-up is necessary. And so what it amounts to is actually putting out all of those little hotspots, so there's nothing smoldering, nothing active, nothing that has the chance of escaping once once crews are off the fire and there's nobody on it. It's less glamorous work, but it is a really important part of fire suppression, and it's really got to be accomplished with a high attention to detail. There's nothing worse than thinking you've got a fire all wrapped up and getting a call the next day informing you that it has just gotten out again. So mop-up is sometimes not a whole lot of fun, but a very necessary component of the suppression process.